Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, where along with my partner in politics, veteran White House correspondent, and Time and Newsweek alum Matthew Cooper, we slice and dice all things politics, and some days, our lawmakers too. On this week's episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show podcast, move over Liz Cheney, last week's number one topic, as the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians takes center stage yet again. 76 years later, one of the longest-running arguments in world history remains unsolved. Rockets blare, bombs fall, people die, and the Mideast Mess just gets messier and messier. American domestic politics doesn't help as the Democratic Party appears to be less and less a friend to Israel and more in the camp of the armed terrorist organization Hamas. Some say the flare-up of the hostilities between Hamas and Israel is about personal power. Some blaming Israel's longest-serving Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his fight for his hold onto power for the current dust-up, and Hamas in a fight for its hold on the Palestinian people over the Palestinian Authority. The issue is complex. Does anti-Semitism play a role? Could a Jewish state be formed today? There are a lot of questions about the Mideast Mess, COVID-19, the January 6th Commission, the Trump criminal probe, the state of the Republican Party. Let's get started. It's Halli and Matt time. Here we go. Good morning, Matthew.
Hey, good morning, Halli.
You're coming to us from the Big Apple today.
Yes, I am in New York.
You lucky dog, you.
Oh, thanks. Yes, it's city's coming back to life, no question.
I'm glad to hear good.
A lot of people out. I mean, the weather's great. A lot of people outside. Feels like it's kind of back.
Kind of back. Well, we're going to talk about kind of back in a minute, but before we do, let's start here. Another week, and a whole lot more Republican crazy. And before we begin, Matt, I just want to remind everyone where we were last week when we spoke. Our headline was Trump opposition leader Rep. Liz Cheney, who in exactly 16 minutes was ousted from her leadership position in a voice vote. One might say this week, Liz who? The news moves fast these days. We now move on to a man largely responsible for her ouster, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Can you give us a little background on McCarthy? Because, he's there, but I don't think a lot of people know who this dude is and where he came from and what he's all about.
Sure. Well, he's from California. He was a longtime congressional staffer for a powerful chairman named Bill Thomas. He's from the Central Valley of California, and I think Bakersfield. And he's, he's kind of straight down the line conservative. He's very personable, which kind of helped his rise in the House. He was close to being Speaker and Majority Leader a few years back when he sort of blurted out that they had formed the Benghazi Commission to screw Hillary. And he sort of said out loud the thing you're not supposed to say out loud. And that set him back for a while. But then he came back, and after Paul Ryan left the speakership and Congress, and now he is the Republican leader in the House. And he's been a tower of jello when to Donald Trump. He was a little tough on him after the January 6th insurrection, but he has been obsequious to President Trump in the months since then. And of course, he was a supporter of keeping Liz Cheney in the Republican House leadership, but then he turned on her. So he's really he's shown himself to be vacillating and
incredibly self-serving. Yes,
in self-serving, but I think despite all that, more likely than not to be the next Speaker of the House. So we'll see.
So I have friends who tell me he just simply is not the brightest bulb in the room.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And that, and so his desire for power seems to outweigh and outmaneuver his own stupidity in moments. That said, there is this January 6th. This is an issue that just riles me to death because I cannot imagine why at this point, where are we, 4 months later almost? More, maybe? I can't count these days. You have insurrectionists in the House and in the Senate. Nobody's done a damn thing about them. I think we all pretty much know what the story is, Matt. And it needs to be looked at. So A, it doesn't happen again. But B, I personally think it's a coup that is ongoing with the help of the man you call President Trump. I call him the former guy. And in the middle of all of this is
you're making it sound like I came up with that.
Well, he is a former president. He's not president.
Honorific I created for him.
Yeah, right. No, didn't mean to do that. But he is the former president. He's president. I just want to stipulate that so that anybody might be confused because he says he's the president.
Right.
That there still is this just really I think it's an ongoing, and they're just working at different levels. And that's a heavy duty that's provocative. Some of that footage of what happened on January 6th, and you go, yeah, I've seen that before. Salvador.
Right.
So let's just talk about this 9/11 commission, this one sick commission. 35 Republicans? Buck McCarthy, who changed his, he was all for it, and then now he's against it. And I don't know whether that's partly because of Trump and partly because he's trying to protect himself, because he made that statement that day, saying Trump was, responsible for it. And he's since, as you say, he likes to go with the wind, so he changes his mind and his opinions all the time. But the fact of the matter is, 35 Republicans, which in this time seems a lot, bucked him yesterday and voted for a commission. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it was a little more than people had anticipated since the ship had come out against it. And look, it's clearly, I think, the right thing to do. There are too many, questions about what happened, how it was organized, etc., to leave up to just law enforcement, which has a narrow focus, who broke the law and who's worth indicting and who could you indict, which is different than the larger question of how it started, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the commission makes sense. It's a format that worked in 9/11. It's what the Republicans said they were willing to do. They kind of got the format that they said they wanted, and then they didn't want it. And look, we're seeing a lot of members who, are now questioning what really happened. They're describing it as like, people just kind of wandering into the Capitol and looking at the architecture. And, including one member, I'm sorry, his name is escaping me, who was photographed helping, block the door to the House chamber. So was clearly aware of the imminent threat to members, and who is now rather blasé about the whole thing, describing it as, again, basically, well-behaved tourists. I mean,
it's insane. Here's what's it's insane.
Yeah.
But here's what's really insane about it, Matt. Why are people who as easily can turn on a TV, the internet, whatever, and hear the truth, why are those people willing to buy this from, I can't remember that guy's name either, who did it? I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, he was made to look the fool because one side of the screen he's saying one thing, and then the next day they have pictures of him, holding the door. I mean, there it is. It's in, living color.
Yeah.
I just don't understand these people who buy this. The mangas.
They don't want to participate in anything that's going to be, critical of Trump. And so that's where they're at. And I think, except for the most deranged wacko, I think they all know the truth. But they just don't want to cross Trump in any way. They don't see it as. But I'm not just talking about future.
I'm not just talking about them. We know who they are. We know that these House crazies in the Republican Party, and now a lot of them in the Senate, which used to be a better bet for sanity. But I'm talking about people in the American public who buy this when all you got to do is turn on the TV and well, maybe if you only turn on Fox, you don't see the truth. I don't know. It's just terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. And the thing is this, it's going to get to the Senate, and that's going to be interesting because it looks like they're going to turn it down, and then they're going to get into a filibuster on this one finally, and then that whole thing's going to blow up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, Matt, that's a little scary out there. I want to bring up Tim Ryan, because if you haven't seen the footage of him losing his cookies yesterday, do look it up on YouTube, because, oh my God. Did you see it?
I did see it. It was very forceful denunciation of the Republicans, turning a blind eye to this. Very forceful.
He's a remarkable guy. He's very effective, and I think he's very underrated as people go. Anything else you want to say on this subject? Because we're at the mercy of when the vote goes to the Senate now. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we know where this is going. We're not going to put that as bad.
And so, what do they do? I should ask that question because there are options for Nancy and Chuck.
Well, I don't think they're going to do much because I don't think they're
really.
I mean, I think you've got a committee hearing going on. I think indictments are going on, but I don't think they're going to, force a government shutdown or something like that over this. I don't know if they got a plan B. I don't know what it is.
Can we put this in perspective? Okay. The Capitol of the United States was run over by Trump and his gang with the help of senators and representatives of the Republican Party. And the Democrats own the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and they can't get a commission. This is insane. This is a leadership problem in the Democratic Party. I'm sorry, I have to say it. You can be sure if this was a reverse, the Republicans would have had that commission already going. You got anything on that? Because you know me, I beat up those Dems. I just think that in some ways they're so ineffective. Yeah?
Well, it's hard to imagine the Democrats wouldn't go along with it. Were this like a BLM takeover of the Capitol or something like that. So I think, I don't know what their legislative options are given that. So I don't know what they can do. But, Biden can appoint a smaller panel and won't have quite the same powers, but he could do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There are options, but these, I just look, because you and I are going to have this argument as we go forward in the next hour about how scary these Democrats can be and, ineffective when they need to be effective. And, and the Never Trumpers are saying it too. They're like, maybe you want to hire us so we can show you how to get these things done because you guys aren't getting anything.
Right. Well, they've never turned down a way to make.
Well, I'm not ignoring that fact too. I'm simply saying.
Right.
I know you know what I'm saying, but I think we need to.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, we need to stamp that point.
Okay, I hear you.
Okay, so let's move on to the Israeli-Palestinian situation. So I've been threatened. I have been threatened, and I have threatened over and above on multiple social media for simply putting my. So let's just.
When you say threatened, what do you mean?
Oh, I mean threatened. I mean, like where I had to contact social media sites and say, you better read this. I don't. You dirty, filthy Jew. I'm coming to get you. I mean, some crazy stuff. Getting Palestinian bots. With one follower, that kind of thing. Just
right.
Doing it's just really weird stuff going on that internet. Let's give a little background on the thing. So what this latest conflict, if you will, and I don't know if the word conflict is correct. Give us a little background how this one particularly got started, as quickly as you can.
Right. Well, the part had to do with conflicts in Jerusalem. One had to do with a kind of eviction dispute of Arabs in East Jerusalem in a neighborhood there where there was a dispute about ownership and rent over some longstanding properties and eviction. So that had galvanized a lot of anger on both sides. You had some militant Israeli Jews threatening Arabs, Arabs threatening Jews. So that was one part of it. You had some TikTok videos of Palestinians beating up an elderly Jew at a bus stop. And then you had conflict on the Temple Mount where the Al-Aqsa Mosque, apparently people had been throwing stones. There's been a problem before, people throwing stones down at Jews below on the Wailing Wall and storing some rocks in the mosque. Israeli forces went into the mosque and fired in there. So that was all a conflagration. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority has been canceling elections over on the West Bank. So Hamas kind of took advantage of all this by inserting itself as kind of the big defenders of Islam, and they started, lobbing rockets into Israel aggressively and firing towards Jerusalem, which they did not have a big history of doing. So they started it in terms of firing the rockets. There's no question. And Israel responded, and they fired more rockets, and that's where we've been for about 10 days. Do you agree with that summary?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I would add this to it, though. I think that you're going to have as things remain the same, so to speak, you're going to have this every 4 or 5 years. And there's for one very good reason. It takes Hamas that long to rebuild their, arms and their tunnels after Israel pummels them. So the reason this is going on for 11 days, and we'll talk about President Biden in a second, partly is because they're going to do it until they feel that they've gotten, all of the secret places the terrorists are hiding, and the underground tunnels and the weaponry. So it's called a cleansing, and in a way, Hamas gave them the opportunity to do it. So there you go. Now, President Biden, and this is what we're going to get, he's walking a fine line, right? He's got his left flank, which is increasingly, I hate Israel and I hate Jews, and I know you're going to argue with that. And you got Bibi walking a fine line with his right flank, which is, get rid of these characters. Biden called for de-escalation. I think it was yesterday. Every day becomes the same. And Bibi launched more strikes. But there has been a relative acceptance on the part of the Senate, which every day is going to be a little bit louder in criticism. But they probably know, for America's sake, clean out the crap, Do you agree with me on that?
Well, I don't agree with you that critics of the Israeli strikes hate Jews. No, I
okay,
don't.
I know. I said you would say that. I did say.
Yeah. Well, I'm just.
Yeah, you're
anticipating.
We're going to have that conversation.
I think the opposition. Look, you had a lot of strong supporters of Israel, like Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Bob Menendez, the senator from New Jersey, saying that Israel should cool it. So I think a lot of friends of Israel are saying that, as well as critics of it. So I think that's the position Biden finds himself in domestically. And I think we should add from before that Israel's in a political crisis where it looked like Netanyahu did not have the juice to form a new government. Now he probably can, given all this. So part of what Hamas did was to kind of was either to guarantee that Netanyahu came back or to screw Netanyahu, but it certainly had an effect on Israeli politics.
There's a lot in what you just said, so let me go back a little bit. For one, the Democratic Party is moving to the left on the issue of Israel. Not moving, has moved, and it's, the young ones. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the reason I bring that up, Matt, is because people like Menendez have to deal with that reality in their own districts. So I'm not entirely, and Menendez, he's one of us. I'm not always sure with him anyway, but there is that dynamic because the Democratic Party can be just as venal as the Republican Party when it comes to staying in power. So let's throw that in there. Tom Friedman did write a piece accusing Bibi and Hamas of war for power. My good friend Ruthie Blum, who we are trying to get together, and it's more me than her. She'd come on the show tomorrow. I just don't have the time. They're overbooking me. But she said in I thought a very powerful piece. Look, part of this is also Hamas versus the PA. Well,
no question. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, and see here, and I bring this up because I think one of the problems with dealing in all of this, and is. It is so complex, and everybody always wants to simplify it. And it's not simple. If it were simple, 76 years later, there would be a solution to the problem, right? I think we always have to say that it's not said enough. It's not one or the other. It's D, all of the above. But I want to bring up this criticism of Israel and why I see a lot of hate. Matt, there are some really scary statistics out there right now. One of them came out just the amount of hate crimes, 250% rise in anti-Semitic incidences in the UK, and many of them on the streets. I mean, we're going to talk about Florida in a minute. That's another place. I think it's a rise in anti-Semitic incidences in Florida by 40% since the beginning of the year. 40%. And so there is an issue going on here that is worldwide. I mean, there's another one that I've got that I put in here about statistics, and Jews, are just being, where is this? Let me get to this. So 1.9 billion harbor anti-Semitic feelings worldwide. 1.9 billion worldwide. There's also craziness if you look at the UN and you see the amount of cases that come up, Israel versus the rest of the nations that, the Human Rights Commission. Oh, here it is. In 2020 alone, Israel received 73.9% of all condemnations by the UN General Assembly. I mean, these are real things. And caught up in all of this is this, that Israel, the Palestinian issue is real. I've always felt that it shouldn't be Israel's issue. I think it should be the Arabs' issue. Equally, at the time that there were all of these people displaced or their homeland usurped, if you will. How many Jews were forced out of Arab countries? 800,000 Jews have been cleansed from Arab countries since the beginning of all of this. After 6 million were killed in the Holocaust.
Right.
I mean, there are things here we need to look at, and we need to say this is all playing into this. And I just don't think it's discussed enough. I just really. You got any thoughts?
Well, I agree with you on the UN. I mean, it's been that way for a long time there. These nations train their wrath on Israel, and they ignore the human rights abuses in China and elsewhere, and it's been awful for a long time over there. So I totally agree with you on that, and I do think the Israeli Palestinian be seen in the context of refugees moving around the world, Jewish refugees out of Europe in the wake of World War II. Jews forced out in huge numbers out of the Arab world. There is an enormous amount of displacement in the 1940s. Russians into the Balkans, Balkans into the Russians, Germans out of Poland, Czechs out of Germany. There was an extraordinary amount of shuffling around the world, most of which got resolved. Only the Palestinians are really sort of identified as being in refugee camps 75 years. So I totally agree. It's a very complex.
It's very complex,
issue.
Right? And
I will say one thing.
Okay.
That
yes.
is overly simplified, and that was this idea that's emerged over the last couple of years that kind of we're at the end of history. That the Gulf states have recognized Israel. The Palestinians didn't revolt about the embassy being moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They've been relatively quiet on the streets. The Israeli economy and tech sector were booming. We were kind of in an era of, to the extent that Hamas acted up once in a while, no big deal. And I do think this last couple of weeks, especially the fighting among Arabs and Jews within Israel, and Arab citizens of Israel, not just Palestinians who are not citizens, but Arab citizens of Israel, I think is exposed that there is no calm in the area right now, and that we've not reached the end of history, and that these are not problems that can just be kind of dealt with every 5 years.
Well, here's where I think I am on that, and that is, first of all, I think the Palestinians have been fighting the wrong fight for 76 years, much to their detriment. Let's start there. First of all, the amount of displaced Palestinians is very, relatively speaking, is it 1 million even? 1.1 million maybe? Something. It's not a billion people. So let's go there. far more of those, of course, as I said, 800,000 Jews cleansed just from Arab countries. And the Jews wind up in what is now Israel, because where else were they going? Because U.S. wasn't taking them in, mostly, right? Most countries weren't. But I think that the problem, first of all, if you keep on doing the same old thing the same old way, Matt, for 76 years after Israel's formed, and it ain't working for you, I think you need to find a new plan. And I think it gets to that question of what you just said. Why is this the only one that seems not to have been solved? And I do believe it's because it's a wonderful political football, or has been for the Arab countries for a long time. And it's also, against anti-Semitism and Jews for their own political gain in power within the Arab countries, because everybody loves to hate the Jews. And so let's go and let's blame it on them. But the Palestinian people, if you will, have not been smart either, because believe you me when I say, take America. Yeah, I got Russian, Hungarian background who come here from, Eastern Europe. You the same. And we're not treated like, invaders. And we all meld together in this country. It's not a question of our old nationality, which we're all very proud of. We're Americans. Why can't they be Israelis? It's because their leadership won't let them be Israelis, not because the Israelis won't let them.
Well, the Israelis are not going to. I mean, if the PA changed tomorrow and said, we'd like to become part of it, we'd all like to be, Israel's not going to go along with that.
Well, that's because of where we are in all of it.
But I don't think they would go along with that, even if
I don't know.
There were no rockets flying. I don't.
Well, I hear what you're saying,
I think the Israeli hope is that it can be eventually like Puerto Rico, like it's a territory. Everyone's basically okay with that. They don't vote, but they may not pay all the taxes, but Israel is the protectorate, and that everybody just kind of gets used to that. I think that's the great hope of many Israelis.
I think they have other hopes too, though. They have hopes of Jordan taking them in. They have hopes of, them going other places and doing other things. I mean, there are 1,001 different hopes that they all have.
They do nurse the fantasy that the Palestinian nationalism just kind of evaporate. I don't think that's going to happen. And so that raises the question of I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but I think it was naive. Look, I think the Abraham, was good for everyone.
Well, you and I agree. Can I stop you there for a second? You and I agree on that. We may be the only ones in the Democrat side, if you will, if we lean Democrat. Because
the Biden administration is
well, that's him. Anyway. That's Biden, the last of a generation.
I think those things good, but I think it was naive. Palestinian nationalism was going to abate, and that it had come to an end. It hasn't. I think the most frightening thing for Israel were Arab-Jewish clashes within Israel, in a way more than Hamas, because I think you see the potential for things really unravel. And I guess the other thing we didn't talk about is that the Hamas attack had the effect of keeping, an Arab party out of the Israeli governing government.
Yeah, that's a very important thing. Yeah.
Which I think would have been a very important and basically positive development.
Well, but did Hamas want that? No, because it's about power.
They did not.
Well, I think you have to make that point because
that's what I was trying to make.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, Hamas does not want a peaceful Israeli society.
Right. But this is why I'm saying to you, I think there are possibilities here, my friend. I do. It's how it's played, but everybody's got their own agenda. Welcome to the world. I mean, these things aren't going to get solved. Let's take this to this too. Question I'm wanting to ask you all: if this were 1948 today, could Israel be?
No.
And I think that's a very important question.
I don't think there's sort of the collective sorrow and guilt now that there was in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust. So,
right, and I think
it's a big counterfactual, but no, I don't.
Right, and I bring that up because of this, because Barry Weiss, God bless her. I just, if you don't read her work, and she's used to be at the New York Times and had to leave, but now she's floating around, and she's every once in a while just posts something. She did an interview with Bronx Democrat Richie Torres. Did you by any chance see it?
I saw that she did it.
Oh my God, read it. Please read it. Everybody read it. He's one of the few Democrats, Richie Torres, you know what he is by his name. But he's from the Bronx. And he's not buying into the Dems party's adoption of false equivalency on Israel, or Israel as an apartheid state, or Palestinian Hamas as the victims. And he's getting pummeled for it. He's a young guy. It's a really, really, really eye-opening interview. But something came to my mind in reading it, which was the Palestinians are treated, they're people of color. And they're getting, Ilhan Omar and OAC and Presley and, talk about some of the others who were really, going up against them and, trying to stop them. OAC put in a bill to stop the $735 million in arms sales to Israel. And Bernie Sanders, by the way, always on that, says he doesn't want it either. That said, there's at the time that of the Nazis, do you remember that Jews could not be white enough was an issue? We were not Aryan.
In Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. They were in German, were an Aryan citizen.
Okay. And Jews have always been considered an other, not.
Yeah, I think no question. Right.
Okay. And I'm bringing up the point that today I think that Jews have been whiteified in America, in the world.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're seen as, by the left, as colonial oppressors. I mean, they just really believe Israel is an apartheid state. And Israel, look, I mean, Palestinians in the occupied territories do not have equal rights. That's not crazy, but they only look at this complicated situation through one lens, and unfortunately that's been brewing since '67, when a lot of the world started to see them as oppressors, and I don't think that's the right lens to look at them. But
well, I want to bring that up. I think what we're seeing on the Democratic Party is that
this has gone on for a while, that the elites and elected officials have been more pro-Israel than the party base. And now the party base is really, fired up after BLM and everything else, and they're really not going to just kind of go along with,
Well, I'm going to call it something that's going to, kind of annoy you probably. But I'm going to do it anyway. It's a reverse racism.
Well, it depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about Bob and Niss, no, I don't think.
I'm not talking about Bob.
If you're talking about most Democrat critics of Israel and Hamas, you may think it's mistaken. I don't think it's just. Now, do I think Tlaib is, that seems possible to me, sure. But
I think it's a generational thing. It's not necessarily. You just made the point about, the elite of the party. I don't know, it's the elite. It's a generation of an age group that's old enough to remember World War II and what happened. I mean, that it's like foreign territory to an AOC or something, I'm saying that there is a problem here, and I think it's a real problem. And I think, like everything else in American politics, it's not always dealt with honestly. It concerns me. In the anti-Semitism that's going on within this country, forget what's going on in the UK, which has always had a problem, and the rest of Europe, whatever, and the Middle East. In this country, 40% increase in incidences in Jewish Florida scares the hell out of me, Matt. And I just think that there's been something unleashed on the Democratic Party that is filtering across the country. And also in the Republican Party. So let's they have different reasons for going different for that, and it needs to be addressed. And it shows up in this thing with Israel and how Israel's. And just as an American Jew, I need to say I think American rabbis are failing Jews miserably in not teaching historic things that need to be taught. Okay, is there anything else you want to say on it before I go off?
No fun.
Okay, so now let's go to this because this is the most fun. Trump. A criminal probe? Who would have thunk it, Matthew?
Yes, did not see that one coming at all.
Oh, God. This is crazy. background.
Well, the New York, the New York District, this is the New York State Attorney pursuing the Trump Organization over potential criminal charges of whether they, cheated on their taxes by undervaluing assets in one case and overvaluing them in another. And, I think they probably feel that they have a case. And so the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, is pressing ahead. Trump is complaining about it, but, the probe is going to go forward. The question of whether they indict the former president, I don't know. We're still a ways from that.
Here's the thing. This story comes out, and I, wonder why it came out now. That's, why this particular moment. You got anything on that?
No, I think you never know quite where the leaks are coming from. Are they AG or the FBI or state investigators?
And why?
You don't know which witnesses have just flipped or haven't. I mean, we do know this allegation has been out there at least since former Trump associate Michael Cohen made rather lavishly. So, the basic idea has been out there. The question of whether an indictment is possible as specific as it is now. So I can't say exactly why it's leaking now, but it is.
I think this, though, they're trying to get Weisselberg to flip alum Weisselberg.
Right, yeah.
Trump's money guy, yeah. And they're banging on his walls everywhere. They're not going to announce it, Matt, or they're not going to let it leak out, or they're not going to let it continue to percolate. In they would have said, no, this is not true, if it weren't true, or no. So there's a lot of game playing that's going on around here, and a lot of muscling, if you will. The thing that's interesting to me is that all of this, I think, is ahead, and I'm curious as to whether or not, because what happens in Congress depends on Trump, right? Not just on the election ability, but on the kind of things that they move forward with, like stopping one, et cetera. And if Nancy doesn't take action or do something, because look, she could have gone against the ones who were participated in the M16, et cetera. She didn't, nor did Schumer. If they want to, if they don't think they can get him within the framework of politics and the politicking of the Democratic Party, that they're looking over to New York and saying, "You do it because we can't do it." Just like they got the guy in the vault guy, I call him Al Capone. Get him that way because we're not going to be able to touch him without destroying her. I mean, one hand washes the other. Even though SCNY and the state are not political venues, they are, but a different. So I think there's some of that going on, which is why, by the way, I disagree with you, and I think that if they have him, they're going to nail him. But he must know stuff, because remember, I brought this up last week or maybe the week before. He did move up to New Jersey, where if they indicted him, he's right next to New York, and they can grab him. Where it might be a little bit more difficult down here, if he's in Florida. So there's that too.
Yeah.
He's hearing stuff.
Trump.
Yeah. Right. He knows where this is right now and whatever.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got to be concerned when you have multiple criminal investigations and civil investigations going on, and the Fulton County attorney in Georgia over election stuff, the Manhattan District attorney.
I just don't see him walking that. I don't see him walking out of all of this. I just don't. There's too much out there from too many different venues.
I never said I thought he'd walk. I just said I didn't think he'd go to jail.
Well, he'll stall it. He'll probably die from old age before. But he doesn't have the money.
He can cut settlements. I will bet you.
You'll bet me anything?
/ prison.
Anything?
Well, I'll take odds. So
I was going to say anything. No. I was thinking all sorts of crazy thoughts in my little head.
So I can get your lovely Florida home. No, I'm looking for ownership of your Florida home.
Yeah, right.
This bet, because I don't think he's ever going to wear an orange jumpsuit. No.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Could he cut a plea deal? Sure.
What kind of that he pays fine?
Suspended sentence. There are a lot of ways you can do it. You serve a suspended sentence, fines.
I don't know.
I don't think he's going to go to jail. But, look, maybe I'm wrong. I'm wrong on a lot of things. Who knows?
The only reason I think that
I hope you agree he's innocent and it's all political witch hunt.
What?
I hope you agree. I'm joking.
I know. I mean, oh my God. I think the purging, all of the, for lack of a brought, and the assault does not get purged. He wins, and fascism, if you will, or whatever you want to call his movement, wins if he is not incarcerated. So I don't believe that any of these people, and Letitia James or what's his face? He's retiring, so he's going to go out in a flurry. His father and I had a little thing, and I have met him and been in their home in Martha's Vineyard. I never thought he was the thing. That's all I'm going to say. But I don't think the son is
the former Secretary of State.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay.
Don't you know about that? I told you about that. Didn't I ever tell
you? I think we need a whole show on that one.
No. But we'll talk about it off air. But I will. He's not his father. That was not. But he's going off and he'll go out in a fad. So I don't think he'll sift away, go out and nail the perfume date. So I think the scalp. So yeah. So that's where I disagree. I hope they do it sooner rather than, because this country needs to have, the pressure. They need to have, the pots are going to explode if you don't release the valve. And so they need to do that. That's what I think. So I'm hoping that whatever it is that's going on, it's going to be done sooner rather than later. Okay? Okay. You're good?
Okay.
You're good. Okay. Let's move to COVID.
No, I
Yeah. Good. What?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not as confident indictment of Trump would have the effect you think.
Oh, my God, yes. If I should do the nail on that. For the Dems.
Okay, well, look, I would hope it would have a sort of cleansing effect on the country. But I don't think millions of MAGA supporters are going to suddenly say, you know what, we were wrong.
No, I didn't say that. And that's another, we could do a whole show on just that. No. That's going to take some blows. Although I will say, that congressman that you were talking about who made the thing about it was just to visit the Capitol.
Yeah.
There was a piece on CNN that was taken from Georgia, one of the southern, I forget where the guy was from, but they went and they talked did you see it? Oh my God. Oh yeah. Well, the piece was really interesting because all of these yahoos who were, totally MAGA were flipped out that he did that. No, I voted for him. No, that was wrong. I mean, I was shocked.
Well, that's good, I think.
Yeah, and I do think that you're starting to see that trickle into everything. But we're not going to solve this one today. Let's wait to see what happens, and let's hope that it happens sooner rather than later. Because I, for one, oh my gosh, I need it. I need the purging. I personally need
an indictment. By it, you need.
Yeah, I need an indictment. I need an indictment. I need an indictment. Let's go to COVID. You're in New York. I asked you before we went on air whether they're wearing masks there. You want to tell your...
Yeah, people are wearing masks, but, they're following this. You see a lot of, you do see a lot of people outside without masks. I haven't seen anybody inside without them or on a public transit, right?
But you have to wear them on public transit, don't you? Isn't that the rule?
You have to.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, inside unless the store has mandated.
So here's some good news.
So yeah, it's coming back to life. I think it's all kind of appropriate from what I've seen.
Yeah, almost 50% of Americans have been vaccinated. Not enough to get us to herd immunity, but 50% is a pretty damn good figure in 4 months. And most of them, the ones who are the most vulnerable ones carrying it. But some kind of interesting there. So in the House, I think even as we speak, they're arguing whether they should be wearing masks or not in Congress. I find it interesting. The cable shows are still keeping people 6 feet apart on the sets.
Right.
Yeah. I don't get.
The layers.
Well, yeah. I just enough. And they just announced this morning they think that the booster shots are going to be necessary by September. I will give you a little bit on what's going down on Florida, which is Florida, the day before yesterday, had the highest caseload in the country. Highest amount of deaths per day in the country. And the reporter is not reporting that outside of Florida, which I find interesting because on a Ron DeSantis issue kind of thing, I think that's a report that needs to be done by some intrepid news organizations. And I do want to bring up very briefly, Matt, news organizations, and the one that I want to bring up is the AP. Can I go back to that for a second on the bombing of the building in Gaza that housed the AP, who were given warning before they went in to bomb it. So let me tell you, from being a foreign correspondent, where we took over hotel rooms to be making into news bureaus, right? You know exactly who is in the building because your life depends on knowing who is in that building. And so what a crock of crap from the AP that they didn't know. And if they didn't know, they don't deserve to be a news organization. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. What I do know has not been, I don't think, been helpful to Israel. I mean, if they gave warning for an hour and Hamas was in the building, they had plenty of time to both evacuate, take their computer hard drives, and just move elsewhere. So what was accomplished in terms of rolling back Hamas? The only thing that was accomplished was earning more enmity for Israel.
I don't agree with that at all.
I think you're seeing reports out of the Israeli military that there was some dissension about doing this. Look, I don't think you're going to get me easily condone bombing of media offices. So, look, I don't know what AP knew or didn't know, but I don't think this helped Israel. I don't see what it could have helped in terms of targeting.
Well, you don't know you don't know what was in that building.
Well, I don't know, unless there was a nuke in the building. I mean,
but it wasn't a nuke. It didn't have to be a nuke. It could be a thing.
What was it?
Well,
yeah, I think
I don't know, but I think
said, it was some kind of Hamas command structure, but whatever the command was, it's safely evacuated along with the journalists. So
my argument is a lot with AP, which, by the way, has out in the field, a lot of people question some of their loyalty.
Yeah, and I've seen those criticisms.
Right. So there's that, and we're media people talking about it, and it might be boring to the listeners, but I don't think it should be, because I think we need to understand who's reporting and what kind of reportage we're getting, from foreign countries, so to speak. But I think they made Israel can make as many mistakes as the next guy. Okay, fine. But they did debate this and decided to go with it. So my guess is they were willing to take the hit on the personality structure of Israel in its image worldwide. That's my thought. So I'll go there with that, and we're not going to solve it. So there we go. Down here, not a lot of mask wearing indoors, just so everybody knows, and. I tell people, don't come to Florida. Don't. It's still not okay here.
Yeah.
It just isn't. All right, lightning. Bill Gates, not the man we thought he was. Uh-oh. Remember I said a couple of weeks ago he was the man of my dreams. He was free.
Yeah, you're not as interested.
No, and I'm concerned that so much of this has been buried. If what's being reported now, she's going after him like gangbusters. Oh my God, this is ugly. The leaks coming out on him now.
Not great.
No
accusations, and we'll see what's true and what's not.
It's going to be. Oh my God, abortion cases going to the Supreme Court. I bring that up. It's not going to be in this session. It's in the next session. Two things come out of that. 3, maybe 2. Test of Susan Collins. Remember Susan Collins? I trust Brett Kavanaugh.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, Susan Collins, there's some really ugly stuff going on about money that was funneled into her campaign that if she didn't know about, she should have known about. And, ooh, baby, I don't think this is a story that's going to go away. What do you think?
We'll have to see.
Yeah, pretty scary stuff. But President Biden, current President Biden, the President of the United States, Joseph Biden, has signaled that no matter what the Supreme Court does on this Roe thing, that he'll get a workaround. Did you read that? I forget the term he used.
I didn't. I mean, I know they've been pursuing a statute that would codify Roe.
Codify. Yeah. Explain that.
Well, you could pass a national law that's legal, but you'd have to pass it, which is, I think, impossible. But
70% of Americans do 70% of Americans do not want Roe overturned. And that includes Republicans.
Right, I agree. I think it would be an incredible boon for the Democratic Party, and
they don't care. Those
overturned.
And they don't care. They don't care. Kavanaugh doesn't care. What's her name, girl? She doesn't care. So I think okay, but let's keep our eye on that one. It's not going to. Yeah, it's not going to be heard till next session. However, you're going to start to see a lot of political money spent on shaming the court into the expectations of 70% of Americans don't overturn it. Marjorie Taylor Greene and husband found to have 2 active homestead exemptions. Naughty, naughty. That's illegal. Will they do anything with that?
2 what? I'm sorry.
Homestead exemptions. You know what they are? Like, yeah. See, we have them in Florida too, where if your primary residence, you can have no homestead, and your taxes go down to just about nothing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not shocked.
You're not? Okay, son of Giuliani running for New York State governor.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
He's creepy. Can I say?
Broken stuff. No, the kid's full NAGA, and
odd little dude.
He is not going to be the governor of New York.
Right, but Val Demings' decision.
Yes, now you must be very excited, right?
I am, because...
You think she can take out Marco?
I do. He's got very little. He bent too much with too many windstorms, and people just don't like that. So I do think she's got a really good shot at that.
What's the attack going to be on her? Too liberal for spending? Because it's not going to be crime.
I
unless they try to pretend like she's soft on crime of the city, but
I don't think they can pull that one off on her. I don't.
Yeah.
The decision down here was everybody wanted her to run for governor because everybody would look to get DeSantis out without, and she could do it, so to speak. I said she would never run for governor. This woman wants to go to the office of the presidency.
Well, you can get there as governor.
Well, it's a lot easier shot to get there versus Marco Rubio versus Ron DeSantis. So I think that's, I'm excited about that. I really, really am. He's an idiot. I wish somebody would go up against Scott because I think he's a bigger idiot, but that's another conversation we can have. Gambling's coming to Florida in a big way because this is not a sleazy enough. Let's really sleaze it out.
Casinos or sports book or what do you get?
Sports and everything. I mean, it was passed for Donald Trump so that he can turn the Doral.
Oh, right.
Into a thing, and they're giving a lot of it. I was going to say they're giving a lot of it to the Indians, the Native Americans, the Seminoles. Yeah, so now it's going to be sports betting and all sorts of stuff, but it's also to open up for Trump to save his hotel. A gambling casino in Miami. It boggles the friggin' mind.
Well, it's everywhere.
I know, but Florida. They just got rid of the Greyhound racing, for God's sakes. Right. It's like, okay. There's a new name in that Gates thing. I was just sent that by text, but I don't know anything about that story. Do you?
Got nothing on that.
Okay, yeah, all right. And so let's end on gossip. Can we end on gossip?
Sure.
Okay,
here's what?
James Murdoch, that's the son who's not involved in Fox, correct?
Right.
Is behind a whisper campaign to undermine Lachlan, brother at Fox, who has been defending Tucker Carlson and the calls for Fox to go even further to the right. So we're now going to have, I have a thing about Rupert saying he's the most dangerous man in the world to democracy.
Right.
And wouldn't it be interesting if one of his sons fixed that?
Yeah, well, interesting, yes.
So I haven't been watching Fox.
Yeah.
Because
it's still very foxy.
I've been stuck on a Western where the good guys wore the white hats and the bad guys wore the black hats. And there are old Westerns, right before they were about to do it, they cut away, and it was so provocative that way.
Yeah.
Called The Man from Snowy... Man from Snowy River. the TV series from the Aussies. Just good, clean,
Nice.
interesting,
Good.
fun. I want you all to watch it.
For them.
It is. And so that's it for me.
All right. Same here. I will see you next week.
Over and out. See you.
Over and out. Okay, bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and is available at hallicasserjayne.com and on all your favorite apps. Be sure to visit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at The Halli CJ Show. Until next time, this is Halli Casser-Jayne.